Our first speaker is Adam Carrel, who is a Perth-based partner in the Ernst Climate Change and Sustainability Services team. Adam has been with the organisation for over 10 years and has worked across a number of countries and sectors with a common theme of helping businesses to better align their business models to global, environmental and social imperatives. Adam focuses on sustainable development and how to build an equitable, ethical and sustainable global economy. Adam's contribution will be via an in-conversation with facilitator and founder of WA Climate Leaders, Mary Phaeton. Please welcome up Mary and Adam.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Mary.
I want to also mention, as well as Josh's introduction, that the first time I came across Adam was through his work on a report called Enough: Corporate Sustainability in a World Running Out of Time. And basically what it did was explored the increased societal expectations on businesses to lead us through the climate crisis and how under-equipped current corporate sustainability practice is to meet that challenge. So Adam, I want to ask you, first of all, why are businesses being asked to lead us through the climate crisis?
Sure. And first I want to say thank you very much to everyone for having me here. And good Lord, I only just made it. You're running early, so that was hair-raising, but thank you. It's lovely to be here. So the reason why businesses are being asked to lead through this is, as we say in the report, it's not the ideal model. In most people's conception of how sustainable development should work, it was supposed to be government that were taking the leading position and setting such well-telegraphed, well-signalled, globally harmonised policies that it was very clear that the global economy was going to be required to operate within planetary boundaries. But we never got there. And we are left with a model where, like it or not, and a lot of people don't like it, but like it or not, business is going to be a critical ingredient towards the realisation of sustainable development. We don't have the time for some grand reimagination of civil society and government. Quite frankly, we've got about 5 years of action, not just in the context of climate change, but across a whole array of ecosystems crises and equity issues that business needs to be a key ingredient of the solution. Otherwise, we genuinely will not get there. And that business obviously includes small to medium enterprises. We're not just talking about the kind of Davos elite here. We're talking about everyone down to the smallest enterprise has to be on board.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit more about the global picture in a sec, but the other part of that was how under-equipped current corporate sustainability practice is to meet the challenge. So talk to us a little bit about why that is and what you actually mean when you say it.
Sure. So for those people in the room, I'm sure there are many that have been involved in sustainability over the last 30 years. We're basically, sustainability has done a great job, right? It's ridden out the peaks and troughs of the last 30 years. We survived the global financial crisis, which was a near-death experience for our industry. We have survived many kind of peaks and troughs at which various times sustainability was always on the kind of chopping block. And it's great in the current environment, which is inflationary and there's geopolitical risk out there and there's various other things, that our role in society and our importance is now somewhat more entrenched. But at the same time, I'd say that sustainability is kind of, and this is what we talk about in the report, it is still dealing with certain Faustian pacts we made along the way, certain deals with the devil we made to survive. And that was this idea that sustainability had to be win-win, that for sustainability to work, it had to be something that not only made economies and businesses operate within planetary boundaries, but it had to be something that the CFO liked, the board liked, that reduced risk, reduced cost, reduced headcount, and all these requirements that sustainability people had to adopt because we wanted to seem benign and to be a low target. But that's absurd, really, and that we were never going to achieve sustainable development while keeping everyone happy. That sustainable development always had to come at the expense of the old economy, if you like. That for sustainable development to be true, a lot of other very empowered, rich people had to be wrong. But we've avoided that fight. So we've only tried to find those solutions that are appealing to the most conservative person on the board of an enterprise. And that means that we're well liked, but we really have not had a mandate to precipitate major, hard, complicated structural transformations. Such that even for some of the biggest multinationals in the world, and this is not a mistake I would want people in the room to reproduce, you've got teams of 4 or 5 people who spend 80% of their time generating reports, the next 10% auditing those reports, and the other 10% dealing with kind of issues management kind of areas where we never got the ball rolling to really expedite what is, let's face it, the hardest, most painful thing the world's had to do since the Industrial Revolution is the wholesale, not just decarbonisation, but putting the economy on a sustainable footing. And we haven't set ourselves up for success in that. And that might sound bleak, but I think for people in this room today, the small to medium enterprise community, what it means is there's so much out there of what not to do. I wouldn't want anyone in this room to feel as though they should look at what the big end of town do and be like, oh my God, that seems exhausting, that's massive, how am I possibly supposed to reproduce all that stuff? I swear 80% of that does not need to be reproduced. And people should feel excited about the kind of latitude they have to kind of reinvent sustainability on their own terms.
Yeah. In light of the directness of the Enough report, I would love to know about the kinds of conversations that you have with clients about whether you're able to replicate that directness in a one-on-one conversation with someone that you can put in a report and just kind of put out to the world and people can read it as they wish.
Yeah, it's a good question. So by all means, please dig this report up. I assume most of you haven't seen it, but if you do, it is called Enough. If you just Google my name and Enough report, you'll find it. It's not an exhaustive read, but I encourage you to read it and I'd love your feedback. We put this report out into the world, which was a fairly stark indictment of the default model of corporate sustainability, thinking that the community would rise up in outrage and great offence, saying that we're biting off the hand that feeds, that we're hobbling our industry just when it was rising to prominence. But we didn't get that at all. We have not had any negative criticism, and it turns out that the corporate sustainability community, which includes people that you'll be selling to in these rooms, the large supermarket oligopolies, the large banks that you'll be working with, the large agricultural trading houses, etc., they're brimming with revolutionary zeal to do something vastly different. So oddly enough, no criticism from any quarter, which is a bit of a careful what you wish for thing to happen, because now everyone's looking at us saying, okay, well, please tell us what to do next, which is quite daunting. But no, there's no taboo out there anymore. There's a whole sense that amongst sustainability professionals that, as I say, it's a kind of careful what you wish for moment where there's like $30 trillion of capital in the world invested under an ESG mandate. Every major organisation has signed up to ESG or sustainability as a strategic imperative, and it's like, now what? It's our moment now to make it happen, and we know that we can't keep going with the historic mode of sustainability, which is what makes this moment quite exciting for our industry, because we have to be far bolder and more daring, and frankly, we have to pick more fights. We have to stop being the nicest people in a corporate community. The nicest person on a boardroom is generally the sustainability person. We have to invert that.
Yeah, I feel like the conversation, particularly over the last couple of months, and maybe it's around the Chubb report and maybe it's around the safeguard mechanism conversation, has gone from being quite conciliatory, that climate people are quite conciliatory in the way that, to all of a sudden it's like, actually no.
Yeah.
Actually no, we actually only have a very little bit of time left and we have to act. So it'd be interesting to see how that transpires. I want to ask you about the global situation, about the pressures globally that will impact us in Western Australia, people in the room. You talked about geopolitical pressure, but talk about some of the other stuff that is incoming in the near future.
There'll be a few things. The first thing to talk about, again, and it's particularly when you're the first cab off the rank at an event like this, I want to build everyone up and feel excited for the state of global sustainability, and you should be, but you can't do that without speaking a little bit of truth about the state of the world. We have relatively recent science in that regard, which is the recently published WWF Living Planet report. For those that haven't seen it, it's a crucial read that comes along every, I think, 5 years. And it's basically a stock take of the health of the biosphere. And every single indicator is in decline. And some of it's precipitous. And we talk a lot about climate change, but in their view, it's not even the most urgent. If you look at the state of the world's riverine ecosystems, if you look at the state of habitat, species extinction, desertification, bionutrient flows, the competition for land, it's pretty stark out there. So we cannot have this situation where climate change sucks all the oxygen out of the room and doesn't allow attention on the full universe of issues out there. So there's that bit, which is it is urgent in terms of how close to the dial of red a lot of these environmental indicators are out there. politically, this is going to be a very tricky time for our space because ESG is becoming a bit of a political football again. It's being bundled in with this sort of inane attack on wokeism out there. And a lot of organisations are rejecting ESG on the premise that means they're a more kind of loyal, patriotic citizen as a consequence. So it's getting muddied back into the culture wars. So there's that on the downside. On the upside, however, is first of all that there's just spectacular amounts of money available to this space, even in the current environment. There's by Bloomberg's measure and anyone else's, a number of other entities out there, there's more than twice the value of the US GDP currently earmarked for sustainable investment. And they're hunting for opportunities to positively screen entities out there. So there's a huge amount of capital which is going to drive this agenda. And per your question about the reaction to the report, there's a kind of, what's that sort of Victor Hugo quote, there's nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. Mm. And you do get the sense around that in sustainability right now, where it's no longer just a cluster of people that are loyal advocates of this idea, but there's just this vast adjacency in the world of allied people whom it is dawning upon them that if we are going to save the biosphere, it will happen on our watch. We're the lucky or unlucky people that have been chosen by history to be there at the moment at which we choose, a series of paths upon which will define the lives, without sounding too grand and philosophical at 9:10 on a Monday morning, it will define the lives of the trillions of people that are to come. There's a lot of interesting philosophy coming through, a lot of interesting long-term utilitarian philosophy to say that 99% of all the human beings that will ever live in the future. And we need to be much better at realising that our lives basically determine the trajectory of theirs. And so I think there is a groundswell of kind of support that, it's why it's awesome so many people in the room today, and it's awesome that people like us get a platform at these things because it wasn't always the case.
Yeah, that's right. You talked about ESG starting to be used as a political football again. I'd love to understand, I'm sure everybody in the room would love to understand why this is such a murky area at the moment and how it needs to be tightened up.
Yeah, I mean, it has always been a part of the culture wars, particularly in this country. Although the last election, I think, showed that there's a disconnect now between the treatment within the political class of ESG and its realisation amongst the popular classes. I think particularly in the agricultural community, there's been a marked shift away from simply adopting and rote learning traditional conservative values because that's been the identity of that particular region, towards crossing over towards being very eloquent about permaculture and restorative business models, etc. So there's a big shift in that regard. But it's this concept of economic intervention that it is still such a political hot potato, particularly in this country. Even if you look at the unrelated issue of superannuation right now, we still treat the economy and old rules of the economy as somehow being sacred, similar to the way in which Americans treat their kind of Declaration of Independence as being a kind of sacred tome that can't be adjusted with. And that's the issue that sustainability people have to grapple with, is we have to continue to challenge all of the arbitrary taboos out there that tell us all the things we can't do, because we have to break the mold of how politics works. We have to, Jim Chalmers wrote an essay, needlessly controversial essay. It was like something Tony Blair wrote 30 years ago and is now being treated as some kind of inflammatory text. But it's this idea that we have to stop pretending that economies aren't largely political constructs created by government who set the rules, and the rules have to keep changing for us to continue to survive. So I think it requires a lot of people to stand up and reject this lazy idea that if you intervene in any market, that's sort of the end of capitalism. And we have to kind of eject that sentiment, I think, from the political class.
Well, I know we're going to be hearing from a number of people, including our next presenter, Karen Monaghan, about how you can, rethink all of these processes and really break them apart and reconstruct them. But I mean, given the size, the scale of this issue, what responsibility do SMEs in the food and beverage industry in Western Australia have to step up?
Yeah, I think, and again, I can accept it would be daunting. That a lot of you deal with major organisations. Hello, Michaela, sitting my old friend in the audience, the person that brought me to Perth all those years ago. You can feel as though you're a tiny cog in a system that you can't control. The astonishing reality is, however, there is not a single sustainable entity on the planet. There's not a single sustainable corporation on the planet. There's not a single corporation. People will talk about Patagonia or Unilever or many others out there that you'd think it's 2023. Surely there are plenty of sustainable corporations on the planet. Not a single one. There is not even a single corporation that knows how sustainable it needs to be by when to be sustainable. And that is astonishing, but it also means that please do not feel as though all the books have been written and that you're playing catch up to an industry that sort of bolted out the door 20 years ago, that we're still in the process of trying to figure out what sustainable business models look like. And that's why I think for this community, you're not lumbered with a lot of the baggage that the corporate world has had, and you can focus on what it means to be sustainable, which is simply to have a neutral or restorative relationship with the biosphere. That's it. People will constantly tell you, oh, sustainability is so subjective, it's in the eye of the beholder, it's impossible to pin down, it's so many things. It's not. The definition of sustainable development is that the current generation gets to enjoy economic growth to the extent that it doesn't undermine future generations' ability to have equal to or greater than economic growth. That's what's chiseled onto the wall in Geneva. That's what the definition is. And it means we need business models that are restorative. And that's the opportunity between people in this room, is to kind of ignore so much of the trappings of sustainability. Don't worry about the indices. Don't worry about the reporting protocols. Don't write great tomes yourselves. Don't worry about certifying your supply chains to the nth degree amongst all these third parties that purport to say, I know what sustainability is. That at the core of it is that businesses either have a restorative relationship with the biosphere or they don't. And it is the primary thing you should think about, is how to do that. And I think Western Australia as a province is uniquely positioned to be able to do that relative to other areas, because we are so isolated. We can actually kind of, to more so than many other regions, really understand the boundaries of our kind of localized biosphere and say with more confidence that we have a restorative relationship with it.
Adam, we've got about 5 more minutes, and I have 2 questions I'd like to ask you. Firstly, about growth, because there's always a conversation around that about how perhaps we need to change the way we think about growth. But yesterday, I was at an event that was run by Ag Zero 2030, and they were talking about, the expectation that the world population would be between 9 and 10 billion by 2050. And if that were the case, then the agriculture industry would need to provide 50 to 60% more food whilst decarbonising and not putting any more pressure on the planet. So can you talk to that concept? Because this is a very different reality for this sector than it is for other sectors. Yeah,
it's such an interesting question, because particularly for ag, sort of every 2 generations, agriculture has its kind of Malthusian moment. The famous person, Malthus, years ago, that basically said that we're clearly going to run out of produce and we're going to have to see major population decline because we can't feed the planet. It's always found a way to defeat the kind of cynics in that moment. And the last great example being the Green Revolution, where we exponentially increased the volume of agricultural output. And some people argue that there are 1 billion more people alive in the world today because of the Green Revolution, which is, of course, inspired by an Australian scientist. So I'm actually relatively confident about the ability of the agricultural sector to rise to this challenge. But I think you alluded to this concept of degrowth, which is a kind of fast-moving kind of parallel agenda to sustainability, to say that we have to get past this idea of aggregate growth every year. Now, the degrowthers out there generally aren't saying that we need to reduce the amount of growth in an economy. They just mean we have to reduce the amount of throughput of an economy to achieve a given volume of economic value. And that is a very important agenda. It's about decreasing the throughput of economies, which gets to, I think, the grand issue of our time in sustainability, which people in this audience should research, which is circularity. That's everything now about value chains. And this is why, again, this initiative, Liam and team, is so important, is because another thing that we won't get there unless we see partnerships in value chains. I know I only have 5 minutes, so I'm in monologue at you, but one of the other things that's typified sustainability is it's been so siloed by boundaries of operational control. Each individual corporations have sustainability strategies, which really makes no sense. We need to see systemic strategies where value chains work together to incentivize one another to operate in a circular, non-linear business model.
Yeah. And then finally, Adam, I would love to hear your thoughts on what it would mean for Western Australia to really advance its sustainability credentials. to the world?
Well, I think we could be nothing less to what, the south of France is to wine. We could be that. I genuinely believe that everything down from green hydrogen through to sustainably pickled vegetables, we could stand out in the world as an exemplar of a sustainable economy. It means so much to us. We've been so lucky by virtue of the linear economy over the years. We have a charmed run, but everyone knows that run is coming to an end. But we have a budget surplus here right now. We have immense political stability. The government has immense political capital. We have higher standards of living than most other places in the world. Oftentimes we've got more billionaires per capita than Monaco. So we've got it all. And I think if anywhere in the world had the luck, we've got GTEs that could work together to decarbonise the grid. It's quite remarkable how blessed we are to be able to do this. And I genuinely believe and want to see Western Australia be in 20 years' time, be seen as the economy and the community and the civil society that nailed it and became the exemplar for the rest of the world. I think we can be so self-deprecating in this state, but in this particular context, I think we can really punch above our weight.
Adam, we'll look forward to seeing you in the panel discussion again after morning tea, but for now, please thank Adam Carrel.